Picking up right where we left off in part 5, let's install the water pump. I've already taken a couple of minutes to clean the gasket surfaces on both the pump and the block, and even though the gaskets do not require any RTV sealant, I smear a very thin layer on the water pump side anyway to act as a glue, so hopefully the gaskets stay in place until I can get a couple of bolts started. Next, I remove the wadded up paper towels I inserted into the block to prevent anything from accidentally falling inside. And now it's time to carefully line up the water pump for installation without knocking any of the gaskets loose and get the bolts started. Now I can use the electric wrench to snug them down, followed by 2 passes with the torque wrench. With the first pass I go to 11 pound-feet, and with the second pass I bring it to 22 pound-feet. Time to install the vibration damper. The PowerBond Premium Replacement Damper has a long reputation on the forums as being significantly better than stock, and I've been running this same damper on the supercharged C5 for about 7 years with no issues. So with that in mind, the C6 is getting one as well. One thing to note is that the stock GM dampers use a friction shim behind the damper, and this part is not required for the PowerBond, so keep that in mind. The first step is to remove the alignment tool that I still have in place from aligning the timing cover. Then behind the scenes, I've carefully heated the damper in our kitchen oven to about 130 degrees to make it a bit easier to slide on. Now I quickly set the new damper in place, and then using a vibration damper installer tool, I thread it deeply into the crankshaft, and now I can safely pull the damper onto the crankshaft about 90% of the way or so. Never ever try to install the vibration damper using the stock bolt. I checked and the damper is not quite far enough on, so I've installed the holding tool, and I give it a few more turns to get it to where the crank snout is only recessed inside the damper by about 1/4 inch or so. Now I can use the old bolt to fully seat the damper onto the crankshaft by torquing it down to 240 pound-feet. 240 pound-feet is no joke, so I use a 2-foot long torque wrench to make it easier, and you may want to do so as well. Unless, of course, you're this guy. Now I can zip off the old bolt, and to do that quickly, I use my mid-range DeWalt 1/2-inch impact gun, which is absolutely perfect for this and for lug nuts as well. If you're going to be pinning your vibration dampener to the crankshaft, now would be the ideal time to do that. For those that are not familiar with it, pinning the dampener to the crankshaft is the practice of drilling a hole between the dampener and the crankshaft, and then a pin is inserted into that hole, and this helps provide additional assurance that the dampener will not spin on the crankshaft, which is especially important for engines that'll be going into performance applications. I'm making the choice to not pin my dampener to the crankshaft at this time, and I've got a very specific reason for it. This is a project vehicle for the channel, and there is an extremely good chance that in the next year, I'll be pulling the dampener back off the crankshaft to perform additional modifications. So for now, I will be taking a small risk, and I'll be running with the GM engineered press fit, and I'll go back and pin the dampener to the crankshaft in the near future. Next step is to grab a new GM vibration damper bolt, and I put a little grease on the shoulder of the bolt to reduce friction while tightening, and several drops of blue Loctite on the threads to help keep it from backing out. I have used ARP bolts as well, but I prefer the GM bolt because I like its torque to yield design for this purpose, as I feel it provides a better stretch, and if that is true, then it should be less likely to ever come loose. Now the new bolt is torqued down to a very light and easy 37 pound-feet of torque, and it is critical not to go over 37 pound-feet of torque at this time, so be careful and get this correct. Now the bolt head is marked carefully, and the final step is to rotate it another 140 degrees to accurately stretch the bolt the proper amount. This does take quite a bit of force, so use at least a 2-foot long breaker bar here. Here is the bolt head in its final position, which is pretty close to being right on the money. Now let's tackle something easy and reinstall the AC belt tensioner, which I torqued down to 18 pound-feet. Followed by the idler pulley, which I hit with 37 pound-feet of torque, and now, of course, it makes sense to slide the AC belt on while we're down here. The rack is going in next, but it is a little grimy, so I'm going to spend a few minutes with some degreaser, a brush, and a few rags to make it a little more presentable. Now I can start the super fun part of installing the steering rack back into the C6. I did take a quick look at the video footage from part 2 where I removed the rack to refresh my memory a bit as to the routing of the rack through the wires and hoses, and that is helpful, but I'm not going to lie, they always feel like the racks, they kick and they scream a little bit while they're being put back in, so make sure you do this part when you're feeling patient and energetic, and sometimes saying a few swear words may not help, but it might make you feel better. Make sure you stop short of getting the rack 100% ready to bolt up to the cradle, as it is much easier to screw the 2 power steering hoses back into the rack with it sitting about 6 inches or so towards the passenger side, and rotate it just a bit to allow access to be able to tighten the hose ends with a line wrench. Done this way, you can get the 18mm line wrench on the fittings and your hand in there to tighten them from the wheel well side. Now we can slide the rack back towards the driver's side and into its mounts, and it may take a little poking and prying, and when it's all lined up, I insert the 2 bolts that hold the rack to the cradle and torque them to 74 pound-feet. Now I can tighten the 2 small bolts that hold one of the power steering lines to the cradle and zip tie the other one to the rack, which I don't recall as being factory. However, it's how I found mine when I took it apart, and it seemed to work just fine. Next, I'm going to toss the main serpentine belt on, as it might just be a little bit easier to do from underneath since the radiator and fan are still out of the way. If you get confused, just Google C6 belt diagram and an image will pop up that'll make it crystal clear. The EBCM support bracket is next. I slide it in from up high and work my way down. Then I tighten the 2 EBCM nuts up first that are up high. Then I insert the 2 bolts that hold the bracket to the cradle and torque them down to only 20 pound-feet. Now let's get the cradle bolts tightened back up. So with a pry bar, I remove the 2 spacers that I installed. Then, using a 1/2-inch drive ratchet, I tighten the bolts up until snug. Then I finish them off with a torque wrench, bringing each of them to 81 pound-feet. I just dropped the aluminum radiator in place. It's got these same type of mounts, these round bushings, that go down here and they drop into the holes on that aluminum piece. So that part's pretty easy. And then on the front here, the condenser, the aluminum of that lifts up and it drops into these little slots. And there's one up high, and there's one a little bit lower down there. Let's see if you can see it. Right there, and there's 2 on the other side. Now I can put the fan back in. I have the hoses being held towards the engine with a couple of bungee cords, so they're out of the way, and I drop the fan down in where the assembly sits on its 4 little perches. So I just need to get the slots lined up with the grooves from the top, then I'll look from underneath to make sure the bottom slots are lined up as well, and they are. Now I can put a bolt in the bottom one and up top as well to hold the fan assembly in place. Next, I'll reinstall the bottom radiator hose, including a clamp on the radiator side. Then I'll move up top to install the clamp on the water pump side as well. Then I can clip the upper hoses into their spot to tidy them up along the radiator and reconnect the steam hose as well. Now the upper radiator hose gets routed and clamped to the radiator and then to the engine side. Now I'm going to go ahead and put the radiator hold down in place, which utilizes these 2 screws. It's pretty straightforward. Just make sure it's sitting flat over the radiator so the bolts don't have to tug very hard on the plastic when tightening it to the frame rails. Then insert the hose into the built-in clips and tighten the screws. Now it's time to give the cooling system a drink with some Dexcool, and I'll keep filling it slowly every few minutes, allowing time for the coolant to run from the surge tank into the engine and radiator. By habit, I always measure how much fluid I remove. That way I know approximately how much I'll need to put back in, and I can fine-tune it from there. Now let's toss the air filter and mass airflow sensor assembly back in. I've done this about 1,000,000 times, making a series of videos while testing the stock LS2 air intake assembly and when I did the conversion to the factory LS7 air intake, so yours will likely look different than mine. That's going to do it for this one, guys. If you learned anything, go ahead and tap that thumbs up below. If you come here often, you might as well subscribe so you get notifications for the next video. And most of all, thanks for watching.